Here's a demo showing the new features in the version 1.3 update for RenderQ. Starting off, I'll turn on some of the features that came out in the version 1.2 update. I'm going to enable the Render Plus Render button. Brings up a nice warning dialog box because when you do render with this, it will prevent you from stopping and pausing renders, so use cautiously. And it brings up a button on the top with the magnifying glass and the Open Locations checkbox and the Remove Suffix Numbers checkbox. This will help show the new features in the 1.3 update. So one of the first new things I added was when you turn off location prompt to reveal all the render locations, there's now a project folder setting. It's always in there. And when you queue up a render, right now I have my comp selected and I'll do H.264, it'll automatically render to the project folder. I'm going to hit the Render Plus to start a render. Because I have Open Locations checkbox checks, when I hit Render Plus and render, it'll automatically open up the folder, as you can see, where it rendered to. Here it is right here, my comp MP4. Now the catch is that it's rendered to this thing, but what if I want to render to a folder within that project folder? Let me show you how that works. So now, I've also added a prefix checkbox in input. When a prefix is entered, say A1, and I queue it up, it'll add A1 to the name of the render. I'll show you how that looks when I hit the Render Plus button. And it brings it up, and now there's a comp named A1. However, this renders to the project folder. What if I want to render to a folder within the project folder? Let me show you how that works. In prefix, I'm going to start a folder called renders, because everybody has a folder called renders in their project folder. And then I'm going to add a /. When I do this, and I queue up the movie, and I'll hit Render Plus, it actually created a folder called renders within the project folder, and it rendered into that, my comp. Now, if I add a name after the /, say A2, and I'll queue this up, and I'll hit Render Plus, it actually rendered to the renders folder, and it added A2 to the comp name. And then I can go even deeper. So instead of having A1 added to the name, I'll have a folder called test, and I'll add another /, and I'll queue this one up and render. And it brings up a folder called test, and it renders into that within the renders folder. So you can add as many deep folders as you'd like. If you ever want to see where the renders are going to once again, all you have to do is hit the magnifying glass, and it'll bring up that window. But let's not get in over our heads too soon. Let me change this back down to renders. Previously, the module name for output 1 for button 4 was in the settings. Now I moved it up to be right underneath button 4, as well as a new module prefix input. When something's input in this, say I'll call this lossless, it'll add this as a prefix to the renders, and making sure that the mod prefix checkbox is checked. I'm going to render it up, and I'll hit Render Plus. And as you can see, it added lossless to the name of the comp. Then, just like it did in the renders folder up in prefix, if I add a / and I render this off, it creates a folder called lossless under renders. And yes, if I add more to this, say AAA, and I'll queue this up, it renders AAA in front of the name in a folder called lossless. If I say add XXX to this renders here and queue this up, it'll add AAA then XXX to the comp name. So here is how the new settings window looks. Each button now has a prefix input. And whatever's entered in these prefixes will be added to the comp name if mod prefix is checked. Also, there's a stills prefix. So for instance, if I have this called stills, and I have a / in that, under still, there's a prefix here. This is the still prefix. When I hit render this with a JPEG with still, I'll hit Render Plus. It creates a stills folder in renders, with the XXX added because I had XXS here, which doesn't really need to be there. I know it's a lot of information here, but it really is cool once it's all set up proper. Thanks for watching, and give a shout if you have any questions.